What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the channel. This is Lotus Talks Basketball, where I, Lotus, talk about basketball. Still working on the title and the intros and outros and everything like that. We're just going to roll with it for now. But we just concluded the 2024 NBA draft, and I have some thoughts and opinions and highlights that I want to share and talk with you guys about. Predominantly, obviously, the first round and the lottery picks, although there's the obvious second round pick to talk about a little bit. Obviously, with me being a Lakers fan and everything, I have some thoughts and opinions to share. But yeah, man, first and foremost, congratulations to each and every single one of these guys that was drafted. I believe there was a total of 58 picks. And I know this is a dream come true for most, if not all of them. A lot of these guys, I'm sure, have been working toward this their entire life. And this is an accomplishment that nobody can take away from them and that most people will never get to experience for themselves. And there was a lot of talk about this being like a weak draft class or like one of the worst draft classes in a while. And it's kind of like a screwed up thing to say, and like I get it from an objective standpoint. Like if you're a GM or a scout or something like that, like you're just doing your job. But I feel like there were so many people who were kind of like hating on these guys, and just talking about how like there's not going to be anyone special or it's just weak, and these players aren't going to be shaping up to be any stars or anything like that. But the way I see it is that every year there's at least a few all-stars in every draft, and inevitably there's going to be somebody in this class that's going to end up being way better than they were projected or expected to be. And time after time, we've seen players who were drafted late in the first round or even the second round go on to be great players. Some recent ones come to mind are obviously like Tyrese Maxey or Jalen Brunson or Nikola Jokic. So Jokic is a 3-time MVP. He was drafted during a Taco Bell commercial. We all heard that. Y'all know the lore, right? Infamously. So regardless of what any GM or scout or any random person on Twitter and the YouTube comments say, I'm sure somebody in this class is going to go on to do great things. And I hope a lot of these guys go on to do great things and have very long, successful careers in the NBA. But with that, let's go ahead and start talking about some of the picks that were made. And we're just going to go in order from one to so on and so forth. And starting with number one, we have the Atlanta Hawks selecting Zachary Rissache with the number one overall pick. And this was pretty much expected, at least as of the last week or so. Because for a while now, it was expected of Alexander Sarr to be the number one overall pick. He was basically touted as the best prospect in the entire draft. But basically, he had a workout for Atlanta and just didn't show up. For one reason or another, he didn't want to go to Atlanta. He preferred going to Washington, whether that's because he thought he'd be able to put up better numbers there, thought it would be a better fit. He was uncomfortable with like kind of the questionable climate in Atlanta and there not being a clear direction. Nobody really knows what's going on there. Maybe it was something to do with like, the clash with Clint Capella and Onyeka Okongwu. Is Trae Young staying? Is DeJounte Murray staying? Are they both getting traded? Is one or the other getting traded? Lots of confusing things going on. Lots of questions to be answered over there that have not been answered. So maybe he just thought there was a clear direction for him over in Washington. I don't know. I saw some people make comments like, oh my God, how could Atlanta not draft Sarr, whatever. But it's interesting because like I saw people saying that, but at the same time, people were saying like, oh, this draft class is weak, so it doesn't really matter. And then it's just like, and I guess part of that is that it's not like I am the most knowledgeable person on the draft class. Not like I have a super detailed info about every single prospect, but I followed it enough to know that there was a point in time when Isaiah Collier was thought to be the number one draft in this class. There was a time where Matas Buzelis was thought to be the number one overall pick in this draft. So it's like the number one pick is something that has rotated a lot. Like the person whose name is at the top, we've seen it change quite a bit over the past year. And obviously that's bound to happen when you see how these guys play out in the G League for that season or in college or overseas or whatever the case may be. And obviously after this past year of basketball, it was thought to be Alexander Sarr. And then at the kind of last second, it became Zachary Rissache. But it's not like there's a massive gap between them in terms of talent or potential or anything, I would say, based on what I know and what I've seen. So I don't think it's a huge deal that the Hawks take Rissache number one. And obviously that means Sarr fell to number two. I say fell, but goes to number two to the Washington Wizards, which is a great pickup for them. And, I mentioned that maybe they had clear direction or a better idea of what's going on over there. But before the draft, right before the draft, they made a trade. And they traded Deni Avdija to the Portland Trailblazers for the 14th overall pick that they also had, because they had 7 and 14. And then a future first, and Malcolm Brogdon. So the trade was Malcolm Brogdon, the 14th overall pick, and a future first for Deni Avdija. And I don't really understand why they would do that, because Deni Avdija is a pretty young player. He's only 22, 23 years old himself. And he just had a pretty good year. Like you would think that they're trying to build and grow like young players right now in Washington. And I know Washington's not known for making the best decisions or having the best front office or being the best when it comes to developing players and everything like that. But like, I just can't make it make sense. I don't understand why you would let go of a young wing like that who's showing so much promise and is so young. And then for a player like Malcolm Brogdon, like, are we trying to acquire assets to flip so we can go acquire like, I don't know. And I say I'm not a Wizards fan, but I don't really understand what that was all about. I think they made some good picks, but I just don't understand why they traded Deni away. I just don't understand that trade at all. But they get their center for the future in Alexander Sarr at number 2. And then at number 3, we have Reed Shepherd to Houston, which I expected this pick to get traded. I didn't think Houston was going to hang on to it, but maybe they just weren't able to find a trade partner. I find that interesting because I would think that maybe Charlotte or Memphis would have liked to have moved up in order to get their guy. Reed Shepherd is actually a player I would have personally liked to see go to Charlotte because I think that would have been the dream pick for them over there with the Hornets. I think him alongside LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, like actually slotted in between those two. They play some 2 for them, add some shooting to the team. I think that would have been great for them. That being said, I think Houston is in a position now where they need to start obviously winning some games, being more competitive, looking to make the play-in, make the playoffs. And maybe you're not looking to add a young player right now that you also need to develop and everything. But, you know, maybe they weren't able to find a trade partner. I know that they did shop the pick around a little bit, but if you are going to use a pick for yourself, I think Reed Shepherd is probably the best bet for you. He, like I said, is probably the best shooter in the draft class. So adding that shooting to any team, honestly, you can't really go wrong. So like I said, I expect them to trade the pick, but if they didn't, it makes sense to me. I know a lot of people weren't particularly high on Reed Shepherd. But like I said, with somebody who's that knocked down of a shooter, I don't really think you can go wrong adding him to basically any team. Then at number 4, Stephon Castle to the San Antonio Spurs. Of course, we all know that the San Antonio Spurs needed a point guard. I expected them to draft either Stephon Castle or Rob Dillingham. They actually drafted both, but we'll talk a bit about Rob in a moment. I wanted to see them get one of those 2 guards, and they got both, sort of, but we'll talk about it. But Stephon Castle, there was some talk coming out of his camp about he doesn't want to go anywhere where there's already like an established point guard because he wants to play point guard. He sees himself as a point guard, so on and so forth. Part of that was probably just strategy from his agent and his camp or whatever to get him to San Antonio to play alongside Victor Wembanyama. And they desperately needed a point guard over there, right? So I believe in his ability to play alongside Vic and just throw him the ball and just let Vic go to work, especially like lobs and in the post and everything. I don't understand why it's so hard for people in San Antonio currently on that team to understand like, hey, Victor Wembanyama is like way bigger and taller than everybody and can easily score over a lot of people and just like can run in transition, can catch lobs, dunk, whatever. And it's like, we should just throw him the ball like a lot. And no one's really doing that. So hopefully Stephon Castle does that. And obviously, you know, San Antonio is known for being a great place, a great organization for developing prospects and everything like that. So the only knock that was really against Stephon Castle is his jump shot. And it's at the combine, he had a really good shooting performance. So there's definitely like potential there that I would say. And if there's anyone's going to bring out the potential, it's probably going to be the San Antonio Spurs. So I think they get a great young, promising guard to pair alongside Victor Wembanyama. I think the future in San Antonio looks bright, obviously, and that goes without saying. And I'm really looking forward to seeing them play, man. I'm really looking forward to see those 2 play together. And then at number 5, we have the Detroit Pistons selecting Ron Holland, which is a pick that I didn't really understand. I still don't really understand it. The Pistons are another team that I could have maybe seen them trading that pick away. But I just feel like they have so many projects on that roster. And it's like they've been in their rebuild for a while now. They had a pretty embarrassing season last season. I mean, 28 straight losses. It's historical, honestly, in the worst way possible. And it's like you need shooting for one. Ron Holland, not known as a shooter. You already drafted Asar Thompson, who was a great player, I think, with a lot of potential and a lot of promise. But Asar can't shoot. Ron Holland can't shoot. Cade is a great young player with a really bright future that may not be in Detroit at this rate because it's like, I think they have a lot of talent around him, but not the right kind of talent. I think that's the problem. I just don't think that the fit is quite there. Like the team isn't constructed that great. Like, and then there's the whole situation with Jaden Ivey that I don't really understand, where I think he's really good and should be in the starting lineup, but his minutes and his play time and off the bench, on the bench, like I don't really. Last season, I didn't really get it. I don't really understand what's going on with Detroit. Obviously, they hired Monty Williams. That didn't work out. He's gone now, and I don't understand. I think Ron Holland is probably going to be a great basketball player. I have no doubt he'll go on to be a great player. It's not a knock against him. I just don't understand the fit in Detroit personally. Maybe they just saw him as the best player available, and that's all there was to it. I don't know. I'm not a GM. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. It's just from what I can see, from what I understand, from what I know, from what I watched, I just don't understand the Ron Holland pick. But again, wishing all these guys nothing but the best for their careers. Maybe he turns into a knockdown shooter. I don't know. But at some point, Detroit got to figure things out. And like I said, start winning some games, man, and start trying to be competitive at some degree. You can't just be rebuilding for 10, 15 years. At some point, you got to make it make sense. And just right now, I just don't think the team makes a lot of sense. I like Jalen Duren a lot. I like Cade Cunningham a lot. I like Jaden Ivey a lot. I like Asar Thompson a lot. I'm sure I'll like Ron Holland a lot. I just don't know if I necessarily like them all together, you know? Love every player on that roster. Don't think it works well together. Then up next at number 6, we had Charlotte drafting Tajon Salon. And forgive me if I'm pronouncing that name incorrectly. I've heard it pronounced so many different ways, but I believe that's how they were actually pronouncing it on the broadcast. But Charlotte's another team that I would have expected to trade up or trade down, or pick somebody else if they were going to retain this pick at number 6. So again, no knock against this player at all. Tijan Salon seems like a really well-rounded, versatile wing who can play a couple of different positions and provide some of what they need on that team. But the thing is, right, is that this is not a player who was particularly highly touted, wasn't expected to go this high, promising prospect for sure, but he's a player that if I'm Charlotte, I would have thought would still be on the board several picks later. So I think that the best player the best player for them would have been Reed Sheppard. I think Reed Sheppard would have been the best pickup for them in this draft class. They didn't get Reed Sheppard. They could have if they tried to work something out with Houston, whatever, move up in the draft and get him. If they could have maybe traded with San Antonio or Detroit or whatever. Well, obviously not because Houston picked him 3rd. But if they could have gotten that 3rd overall pick and got Reed Sheppard for themselves, that would have been the ideal scenario for them, in my opinion. If you're not going to do that, then I would say you probably trade down, because if Tijan is your guy and you were going to draft him one way or the other, or if you valued him enough to draft him at number 6, I'm really confident he would have been on the board later. So I know Memphis would have loved to get their hands on Donovan Clingan. They really need a big. They got one, and we'll talk about him later on. But Donovan Clingan was basically the center to pick in this draft, right? He would have been great for Memphis. I know they had to want to move up, especially because the next pick at number 7 was Donovan Clingan to the Portland Trailblazers. So again, like, I don't really know. Maybe there were some rumblings. Maybe Charlotte heard somebody else was interested in Tijan. Like, I doubt it. Like, I don't really know if he would have been there, been gone at 7 or 8. He still would have been there at 9. I'm pretty confident he still would have been there at 9. And again, maybe they just couldn't find the right partner. The trade, maybe it just wasn't there. I don't know. But I just feel like it makes so much sense. Like Memphis and Charlotte, I don't know what they could have done. It could have just been draft capital swaps for all I know or care, right? But you couldn't figure out nothing. Again, I think it'll be fine. I think it'll be a great pick. It's just you could have gotten him and probably an asset or two on top of that if he was your guy. And then, Memphis could have gotten what they wanted. But maybe they also just didn't want to help Memphis. I don't know. Or maybe Memphis didn't offer them anything that they cared about or wanted. I don't know. I was just kind of surprised to see Tijan Salon go this high. And then, as I just previously mentioned, the Portland Trailblazers selected Donovan Clingan with the 7th overall pick. That was the most highly touted center in this draft outside of Alexander Sarr, obviously. And he's honestly a guy that I saw rising through the ranks in the mocks a lot leading up to the draft in like these last week or two. And there was even talk that he might go number 3 to Houston. And I thought there was a real chance of that happening. A part of me was a little bit surprised that Reed Sheppard got picked just because people were kind of sleeping on him. I felt like I said, he's not the most athletic, wasn't like the most defensively gifted. I know that he's gotten a good amount of steals and blocks in his college career. But people just kind of had their concerns about him and his size and athleticism and everything like that. But like I said, I think he's going to be a great player. Like I said, I just don't think you can go wrong with shooting. But Donovan Clingan ended up falling all the way to 7 to the Trailblazers. And I know Memphis was sick to their stomach over that. But between getting Donovan Clingan, acquiring Danny Avdija, the Blazers, they did pretty damn good. Shout out to the Blazers because they might have won draft night low key. And then at number 8, you have Rob Dillingham to the San Antonio Spurs, which I was kind of hype about. I was like, oh snap! So they're gonna make like Rob compete with Stephon Castle for the point guard position, or will Rob Dillingham come off the bench behind Stephon Castle? Like, how's that gonna work? And it was really cool because I think Rob Dillingham was like one of my favorite players in this draft just because I just kind of like his style, his game and everything like that. Also, I think he probably had the hardest fit other night, but that's just me. But yeah, shifty young guard reminds me a lot of like Darius Garland or like a Bones Highland. I don't really know if like the goal or the idea for him is to be like this this starting point guard or like provide like a scoring punch off the bench. But regardless, he ended up getting traded to Minnesota, which I did not see coming whatsoever, but I think is perfect for Minnesota. Again, shifty young guard that I think could play alongside Anthony Edwards. But the beautiful part about it is that like he could start off as somebody who plays behind Mike Conley. Mike Conley as his mentor, teaching him how to navigate the game and everything like that, helping him mature, mentoring him, everything. I think that'll be beautiful. And then during that time, you still have Mike Conley starting, Rob Dillingham coming off the bench as maybe your 6th man, providing a scoring punch, running that second unit. As he learns, grows, matures, and develops, he takes the reins over from Mike Conley, becomes a starting point guard for the team alongside Anthony Edwards. And also, one of the biggest knocks against Rob Dillingham is his size, his defense particularly. Right? So what do? You send him to Minnesota where he's surrounded by great defenders, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Rudy Gobert. Then they make up for that weakness that he has. It's a perfect fit as far as I'm concerned. I think it's beautiful. I'm excited more than ever probably to watch the Minnesota Timberwolves and see how that pans out. Obviously, they just had a great season. Getting a pick like him, I think is a great pickup for them. And San Antonio got a couple of picks for him. So they already had their guy, their man, their point guard in Stephon Castle. So, I think that works out great for both teams, and I'm just looking forward to it. Then at number 9, this one might have been one of the most surprising. Is this the most surprising pick? This is probably the most surprising pick to me. Zach Edey to the Memphis Grizzlies with the 9th overall pick in the draft. And obviously we know that Zach Edey, everything he's accomplished in college and what a great player he was, his scoring ability, his rebounding ability, most importantly, especially when it comes to Memphis. Yeah, not the youngest guy in the draft by far. And I think that's the biggest knock against a lot of these guys was their age. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we touch on Dalton Knecht going to the Lakers a little bit later. But there are two things that I feel like Memphis needed. Wings, bigs, okay? And I thought it would make more sense for them at this pick to draft like a Cody Williams or a Ron Holland. Obviously, Ron Holland was off the board, but I was pretty confident that they were going to pick up Cody Williams with this pick. I know they needed a big, and I'm all for it, yo. I'm here for it. It kind of got me hyped because I really enjoy watching Memphis. Zach Edey. So what this means for them is that they slide him at the 5, right? Jaren Jackson gets to go back to his true position at the 4, because like Jaren Jackson's been playing center. I don't really see him as a real center. He's a power forward. You know, they really wanted a wing as well, so Desmond Bane can go back to his true position at playing shooting guard instead of playing the small forward. But I think this works out beautifully for them. I mean, he's going to provide rebounding that they need, size, obviously defense, and John Morant feeding him the ball. You know what I'm saying? I think that's going to be the best point guard Zach Edey has obviously ever played with. And while I don't expect Zach Edey to be a 20-point per game scorer or anything like that in the NBA, I think that he's going to be able to eat when it matters, and he's going to be able to come in right away and make an immediate impact on Memphis and help them contend and help them compete. And I think that's something to be said about some of these like older players, like 4-year players, whatever. I say older, but being 22, 23 years old, I feel like they get written off way too much, which is really dumb to me. When we see players who have come in and made immediate impacts and how good they can be despite having gone to college for multiple years, we've seen that time and time again. But again, something I might rant about later. But yeah, I think Zach Edey is a great pickup for them. It was a little bit of a reach, but hey man, they weren't able to get Nicholas Claxton because he re-signed with Brooklyn. They weren't able to draft Donovan Clingan. So it's like, hey, we walking out of here with a center, damn it. So they went and grabbed Zach Edey, and I'm here for it. I thought they would grab a wing with this pick just because there was some of the more highly touted prospects. Like I said, I thought they'd go for Cody Williams, but hey, Zach Edey, it is what it is. But speaking of Cody Williams, he ends up going to Utah with the 10th overall pick. Like I said, I thought he'd end up in Memphis, maybe even Charlotte to pick him up or something like that. But he goes to Utah, and I think that's going to be a great pickup for them. A nice athletic wing, not like the most explosive, but hey man, if them jeans is anything like what we see in J-Dub over in OKC, I think he's going to be just fine. For what I've seen, he can do a little bit of everything. I trust in his ability to shoot the ball, defend. Seems like a pretty solid passer. So I think he's going to be pretty good pickup for Utah. Then at number 11, Matas Buzelis to the Chicago Bulls. I'm not going to lie, I kind of like the way things are starting to shape up over there in Chicago. Things are starting to shake up a little bit. Also, noteworthy, I saw something on Twitter. I haven't done my due diligence, so take this with a grain of salt. I saw that it was confirmed that Lonzo Ball is cleared for all basketball activities. I don't want to get anybody's hopes up, but I'm personally rooting for Lonzo Ball and LaMelo Ball as well. And I was rooting for LiAngelo, even though things kind of never panned out, but I was always rooting for them kids. And hey man, the Bulls will really fun to watch when Lonzo's there. I don't know what becomes of him in his career and the Bulls, anything, whether he comes back or not, but I digress. Point is, Matas Buzelis to Chicago, his Chicago kid himself, him making it back home. You can see the emotion on his face when he got drafted. Very, very excited and happy for him. I know the guys over at number on the board, you know, Kenny, Pierre, D Mills, Mike, and all those guys, they got to interview him. I watched that interview. He seemed like a good kid with a bright head on his shoulders. And I believe he also had an interview with JJ Redick a while back that I watched. And like I said, around that time, he was projected to be probably the number 1 overall pick. Kind of had a down year when it comes to his shooting with the G League Ignite. Granted, the G League Ignite may not be necessarily the best place for people to show and develop their skills. I mean, we see some players come out of there like Jonathan Kuminga and Jalen Green, and then be solid, not going to be some super mega stars or anything like that yet, but, you know, be solid players. And I think the poor shooting is probably what really hurt his stock a lot in his draft. Like I said, the shooting has been the knock against a couple of players like him, like Stephon Castle, whatever. Granted, it didn't seem to hurt Ron Holland as much as I would have expected. But regardless, that's no shade to Ron Holland. Like I said, I expect him to be a great player, just not necessarily a great shooter. But yeah, Chicago picks up Matas Buzelis. Obviously, they got rid of Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey. They have Ayo Dosunmu and Kobe White, who are shaping up to be great players. I don't know what becomes of Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan and Vucevic, but it's definitely time to move on from those guys. I don't know. Hopefully the Bulls are finally entering their rebuild to some degree, and I really want to see it because I think Chicago has sat on their hands for too long, and it's time to make some moves and move on. Next at number 12, Nikola Topic to OKC. OKC, like I said, they just acquired Alex Caruso from Chicago for Josh Giddey, and then immediately got their Josh Giddey replacement. Nikola Topic is another player who was at one point considered to potentially be the number 1 overall pick. Like I said, that number 1 pick in this draft, that was constantly rotating between like Topic, Sarr, Reece Sachet, Matas, Isaiah Collier, Ron Holland. Like all of these guys were at some point considered to be the potential number 1 pick in this draft. It was just always up in the air. But Nikola Topic was somebody who like crept up there and was supposed to be a top 3 pick. It was up in the air about whether or not he'd be number 1 or whatever. But then he suffered an ACL injury. So obviously that hurt his stock a lot. And I honestly thought he would probably fall even further than this. I didn't expect OKC of all people to draft him, but they did. But, you know, they're already a really good team with some solid depth and everything. They have some holes that they need to fill. I didn't necessarily think that the point guard position was one of them, but they're going to be able to let him rest, recuperate, recover, learn, be around the league, or whatever. Basically the exact same thing Chet did. You know, Chet was drafted with the number 2 overall pick, and he got hurt, I believe, in the Drew League, was it? Playing against Braun, or was some sort of summer league, not the summer league, but some sort of like league before the NBA actually kicked off, and he missed his entire rookie season. He was able to be around the team, around the league, learn, train, grow, develop, whatever. And he came in and he's been a dog from out the gate. And if it wasn't for Victor Wembanyama being like a historically great, like generational talent, Chet would have been rookie of the year. And I'm not necessarily saying that the exact same thing is going to happen with Nikola Topic, but it could. And I believe in, you know, OKC's ability to, you know, develop and help him grow, learn and everything, mature and everything like that. And like I said, be that Josh Giddey replacement. He's somebody who could be what they thought Josh Giddey was going to be, and maybe has an even higher upside and passing ability and everything like that. I don't know what that means, if he's going to end up being like a player who will run the second unit, or if they expect to slot him at the point guard position and slide Shea back over to the 2. I don't know what the long-term vision is there. Then at number 13, the Sacramento Kings picked up Devin Carter, who we kind of looked at as potentially the Davion Mitchell replacement. And I think that was all but pretty much like confirmed by the fact that Davion Mitchell was then immediately traded this morning to the Toronto Raptors alongside Sasha Vezenkov. I had a couple of Kings fans in my chat while I was streaming myself, hanging out and watching the draft. They're like, so surely he's the Davion Mitchell replacement. And yeah, pretty much that basically confirmed it, right? Then you have Bub Carrington going to Washington, who acquired this pick, obviously from the Portland trade. And again, I don't really understand why they traded away Denny Avdia, but they managed to get their center for the future. They got Bub Carrington, and they were able to draft a wing in Keyshawn George later on in the draft. So I'm like, they got 3 good pieces to build with. It's like when you're drafting, especially at this point in the draft, you're kind of hoping that a pick ends up as good as Denny Avdia. So it's like, okay, if you manage to get a player that is what you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like you already had what you're hoping to get. So I don't really, it is what it is. It is what it is. Then at 15, the Heat draft Kel'el Ware, which they needed a big and a guard. I've been seeing some talk from some Heat fans, and I have a homie who's a Heat fan, that kind of want to see Bam move on from playing center and having the ball in his hand more and being more of a 4, because they feel like he's just too skilled to just be a big like that. And I would like to see it. And is Kel'el Ware going to do that? I don't know. But if Kel'el Ware ends up being their 5 of the future and Bam is a power forward moving on, it's interesting. Either way, I think Kel'el Ware will be a good fit for them. I think he will provide some of what they need. I thought they would honestly go with a point guard over a big like Kel'el Ware. I thought maybe they'd get Jared McCain. Maybe they didn't think he was a good fit in Miami. I know there's a lot of criticism around Jared McCain. I know Miami Heat culture is such a big thing or whatever, and fit matters a lot over there. But none of the criticism for Jared McCain has anything to do with his basketball ability. I feel like a lot of people are just being we're not going to get into it. The boy does TikToks and paints his nails and stuff, and people hate him, or at least hate that about him. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Like, all I care about is, can you put the ball in the hoop? As long as you ain't getting in no trouble, I don't care about what TikToks you're doing and what color your nails is. A lot of people care way too much about stuff like that. It's really not that big of a deal to me at the end of the day. Are you a good basketball player or not? As long as you ain't hurting nobody or doing anything illegal off the court, I don't give a fuck. But that's just me. That's just me. And then the 76ers end up picking him up with their pick at number 16, which is a steal, in my opinion. Does he come in and start, trying to replace Kyle Lowry? Does he play alongside Tyrese Maxey? I don't necessarily know how that fit works, but I think it's a good pickup for them regardless. I thought maybe they go for more of a wing kind of a player instead of a guard, but hey, you could have Maxey run the 1 and Jared McCain play off ball. I think Jared McCain, from what I've seen, plays really well off the ball, and obviously can space the floor and everything like that. So I think it could definitely work out, and especially when you're playing with a player like Joel Embiid, who commands so much attention. Having more shooters on the floor, never a bad thing. And now we get to the 17th overall pick in the draft. Dalton Knecht to the Los Angeles Lakers. Is this the biggest steal of the draft? Potentially. There's a couple other players who could be the biggest steal, but Dalton Knecht is a player that I did not expect to fall all the way to 17 just because he's so good and his scoring ability, his ability to shoot. This is a guy that I can't believe fell all the way to us. Every mock that I've seen, every person I've ever seen talk about this draft, whatever, they always had Dalton Knecht as a lottery pick, and most of the time in the top 10, if not a little bit higher. So the fact that he was still there and available for us at 17 and is exactly what we need on this team right now if we're expected to be contenders and want to compete and everything like that. We got a guy who comes in right away, can shoot really well, can score. I was honestly shocked to see Dalton Knecht continue to fall further and further in this draft. It started to remind me of last year's draft with Cam Whitmore, because Cam Whitmore was a pick who was projected to go in the top 5, or at the very least the top 10, and he ended up falling all the way to, what was it, 18, 19, somewhere around there. And I thought the Lakers would end up drafting him at 17. We passed on him, and then I believe it was Jaime, Cam Whitmore, and then Brandon Podziemski, if I'm not mistaken, right? So that would have been 18, 19, 20. Instead, we drafted Jalen Hood-Schifino, and honestly, I would have preferred any of those other 3 players, but it's fine. Regardless, when we got to the point and Dalton Connect was on the board, I was like, bro, just take him. Just take him. He's right there. He's exactly what we need. He's a player that's already shown that he's developed, can shoot, which we really need. Obviously, we need shooting. He can fit right in. He's exactly what Los Angeles needed. So the fact that he was just right there for the taking, it's almost too good to be true. It's almost too good to be true. He could end up being the biggest steal of the draft, and hey man, I seen JJ Redick's already drawn up plays for him, so I'm looking forward to it. But anyway, past this point in the draft, I don't have too many things I want to note or highlight or talk about except for 2 more players, and that is Terrence Shannon Jr. and Isaiah Collier. With Isaiah Collier, he got drafted number 29 to the Utah Jazz, and it's just interesting to see because, like I said, at one point, this was a player who I believe coming out of high school was the number 1 prospect in the country and was thought to be the number 1 pick in the draft, and he fell all the way to 29. Still a first-round pick, but it's just crazy to see how drastically things like that can fluctuate, and I just kind of want to take note of it and mention it and everything like that, which just goes back to say, like when people are saying like, oh, how could the Hawks not take Sarr? It's like, well, he didn't want to be there. And also it's just like this draft it was so up in the air like this all year that it's just like, it's really not that big of a deal that Zachary Reese-Lachey went over him. And then the other player I wanted to talk about was Terrence Shannon Jr., who was a player that reminds me of Dalton Connect in the sense that he was a multi-year college player, so he's not the youngest in the draft, but he's very, very skilled, very good, and already proven, right? And he has a couple of knocks against him. With Dalton Connect, the reason why he fell as far as he did is because of his age, right? I think GMs, scouts, teams, organizations, and even fans are valuing youth in players way more than they should. And it's something that I don't really understand because you look at a prime example, right? Mikal Bridges was a player who was not super young coming out of college, and his teammate Cam Johnson was not super young coming out of college. And we've seen the value that they have and the impact that they have. And Mikal Bridges is a player who just got traded for 5 first-round picks and is the piece that has now tipped the scales drastically in the favor of the New York Knicks, has made the New York Knicks one of the top 3 teams in the league, maybe even top 2. Like why are teams and organizations, everybody's so scared of picking a player that's already shown what they can do? Also, why are we pretending like they're already capped at the age of 22, 23? Players can get better, a lot better. Jalen Brunson was not 18, 19 years old coming out of college and was a 2nd-round pick and is now one of the best players in the entire league. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying he's like top 5 or anything like that, but you know, you might have him in that top 10, top 15 conversation, was one of the absolute best players in the playoffs, is the star player for the New York Knicks. At what point do we start valuing what players have already shown us that they can do compared to what we think or hope that they might be able to potentially do one day? And I get it. Like, you do have to keep that into account. That is something that should be considered. But it's just like, I think this whole potential thing is kind of getting overvalued a lot when it comes to certain players. It's like, we already have a proven thing right here in a player like Dalton Connect or Terrence Shannon Jr. Now, Terrence Shannon Jr. is not only an age thing, but he also has some legal troubles that he got into. You know, there were some allegations that were thrown against him. He was acquitted of those charges. He beat his case. So as far as we're all concerned, as far as we can all move forward, he's innocent. He's free. But I understand him falling a lot further because it's the age thing plus stats. Like, I get it. But him going to the Wolves at pick 27, that's the other one. I'm like, that could end up being potentially the biggest steal in the entire draft. To me, it's got to be him or Dalton Connect, in my opinion. Like I said, these are players who, like, their ability to score and the immediate impact that they can come in and make. I feel like that's something that really shouldn't be overlooked, but it kind of was, and that's why they fell as far as they did. Again, with Terrence Shannon Jr., there's more to it than just the age thing. But with Dalton Connect, there's no excuse. It's just the age. He's 23 years old, I believe. And they're just like, nah, I don't really feel like it. Which, sure. Let us have him, bro. That bell is averaging 40% from 3 on like 7 attempts per game. Well, I'll take that every day of the week. But maybe that's just me. But that being said, those are pretty much the majority of my thoughts on most of the first round. Obviously, the lottery picks plus a couple of extra ones. My knowledge does not extend deep enough into this draft class to speak too much about some of the later first round picks or most of the second round picks, except for Bronny James, who has officially been drafted by the Los Angeles Lakers with the 55th overall pick. And my opinion on this is that It's a beautiful thing. Okay. I'm a Lakers fan. I don't expect Bronny to come in and be some superstar, right? I follow him closely enough because he's the son of LeBron James to know that I think he's a player that will make an impact. I think he'll be pretty good defensively. I think he has a good feel for the game, good vision, good awareness, good passing ability, obviously things that you would expect, and athleticism, all this that you would expect to see from the son of LeBron James. But I'm not going to look at him as the son of LeBron James when it comes to my expectations for him as a player. There's a reason why he fell this far in the draft, okay? He's not expected to be he's not going to be the second coming of LeBron. I know he's his son, but LeBron James is at worst the second best player of all time. I think it would be ridiculous to hold him to that standard. How many players end up having children in the NBA and they go on to be as great as them? There are some exceptions where like players end up being better than their dad. Like Steph Curry is better than Del Curry was. Jalen Brunson is better than Rick Brunson was. But normally when a guy is an all-time great player, their kid doesn't end up being as good as them, because how could they? Those are impossible expectations to live up to. So I'm not going to hold them to that standard, even though I know a lot of people are, whether that be on Twitter, in the media, or whatever. I'm not going to be one of those people. What I will say is that I think it is a beautiful and incredible thing that LeBron James and Bronny are going to be able to play together. Now, I know that that might not be honestly the most exciting prospect for Bronny. He doesn't honestly seem that enthused about that idea. And like to some degree, I get it, because it's like I'm kind of trying to do my own thing. I already got all this pressure and all these eyes on me and everything because I'm your son in the first place. And it's like people are talking about nepotism this and nepotism that, and he only made it because he's Bron's son and blase, blase, blah. And it's like, at the end of the day, man, nepotism is rampant everywhere in this world, especially in the NBA. How many coaches, GMs, players, people on the staff, whatever, like are only in the position that they're in because they're the son, cousin, nephew, or whatever of somebody with some power or some money. It's just one of those things that because it's LeBron, it's blown way out of proportion. Because it's the Lakers, it's blown way out of proportion, just like everything is. And at the end of the day, I'm wishing all these guys nothing but the best. And the same thing goes for Bronny. I put out a tweet before I recorded this video that like I'm excited. I'm glad to have him in LA as part of the Lakers. I hope he goes on to have an incredible career. Obviously, I do. Not just because he's the son of LeBron James or because he's a young guy. Like he's on my team. He's a young player, and I just want to see everybody succeed. I want everybody to do well. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like I'm praying for him. I got my fingers crossed for him. I hope to see him be successful and establish his own name and everything like that. Well, I say his own name. His own name is just his dad's name, but you know what I'm trying to say, man. I have no issues with it. I'm looking forward to it. I actually want to go to one of these games in person and see them on the floor together. There's no way of really knowing, I guess, when they will actually play together, because again, I expect them to kind of be in the G League, but we'll see how things go. I don't really know. But at the end of the day, I think it's a really cool thing. Everybody and their mom's gonna have their opinions on it. Everybody and their mom's gonna have something to say about it. I'm somebody that's just going to witness history and just enjoy the show. Now, I said all of that, but I was somebody that was of the opinion that based off that year at college that Bronny had, especially, you know, after the heart condition and everything like that, he probably could have benefited from staying another year at the very least, if not all 4 years at college. But it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't fault anybody who's just like, hey man, I'm trying to get to the league as quickly as possible. Cause like, I get it. Like if I was 18, 19 years old and somebody said I have a chance to make it to the league, even if it's only because of who my dad is. And like, granted, he doesn't want to be drafted just because of his dad, but it's just like some things you just ain't got no control over. You know what I'm saying? So regardless of what anyone says, thinks or feels, it happened. He's here. He made it to the league. He's on the team with his dad, and I'm not mad at it. And I don't think anybody else should be either. But with that concludes all of my thoughts on the draft for the most part. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. I'll try to respond to as many as I can. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them, because I'd love to hear what you guys think about the draft and these picks overall. And how are you guys feeling? What team are you a fan of? Who did they pick up? And are you excited about it? Because I'm pretty excited about the player that my team picked up. But with all that, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Hit this video with a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you haven't already so you can stay tuned for all this content that I'm bringing you. And with all that being said, that's pretty much all for today. And remember, nothing can happen until you swing the bat. Later.